Alfred Naro.
Kia ora tātou katoa tō mātua tira. Greetings to everyone here. Kia ora tātou katoa o te moana nui a kiwa. Greetings to all our Pacifica visitors and guests that are here today. You have travelled from far away to be with us at this inaugural Parliamentary Forum and to listen and to observe this historical debate, the first time that it's ever been had in the House, of 3 hours to discuss our Pacific issues. So not only is that historic, but your presence here is historic as well. And so we do look forward to the next 3 days to spend time to debate, to discuss important issues as well. I want to just reflect on a story that I once heard. There was a Pacifica, a young man, and a European, a Pālangi, a papa, a young man, and together they were friends. And they decided to go off and they wanted to go camping. And as they went camping, they didn't have a tent. But what they did have was from the warehouse was a blue tarpaulin. And so they put the blue tarpaulin and they put it over the top and they put this tarpaulin up and they said, that'll be our tent. And they went out and they played for some time and eventually they stopped and they had something to eat. They had some puvi masima, some corned beef, which is very healthy for you. They had some kalo and then had breadfruit and they sat and they ate and they told all the stories about how their parents would be very annoyed that they'd spent this night out in the tent. Anyway, they went to sleep and in the middle of the night, the Pālangi, the papa, a young man he motioned to the Pacifica young man and he said, hey, get up. And I said, what's wrong? And he said, look up. And he said, yes, look up and what do you see? And then the Pacifica man said, what do you mean? And he said, well, the Pālangi said, well, what I see is that when I look up, I think about astrological. That means I learned at school about the wonderful thing about the stars and the Milky Way, and isn't it wonderful? And he said, when I look up, I think about astronomical as well. And, I got them mixed up. Actually, astrological is about the magazines and reading about your horoscopes. Astronomical is about the Milky Way and the stars. And then the Pacifica young boy wanted to say something, but that's not all. The Pālangi boy, because he was on a roll. You see, he was bright, he was intelligent. And he said, I think about theological. And I think that, when we went to church and they taught us about how God had created this wonderful universe in this world. And then he said, but that's not all. I think about meteorological. And I think about the fact is that I look up and I see those stars and the movement tell me that tomorrow it's going to be a fine day. And with that he finished. And then he motioned to his young Pacifica friend and he said, so what do you see when you look up? The Pacifica young man looked up and looked to his Pālangi friend and said, someone stole our tent. Here's a very simple analogy and a very interesting story. In other words, you can have a world of intelligence, you can have development, you can have economic, social, cultural development, but at the same time too, if we are not careful, we can miss the very thing that's important to us. So can I encourage all of us, both politicians here, political leaders that are here today, sometimes we need to stop for a moment to look up and see and have a little common sense. And that's what the debates over the next 2-3 days are actually going to be about. You see, we can be intelligent, we can have research, we can have evidence, and those things are absolutely important. But what you and I know, that in the communities that we live in, whether in Aotearoa here in New Zealand or back home in your communities, sometimes the issues are actually about some common sense. And I believe that what our communities are looking for are leaders that have a little common sense, that speak in a language that they understand, that they can connect with, and they can communicate back to you and I with. That's what they're looking for. That's the confidence that they're asking for us as well. I want to relate a little simple story about taxi drivers. They're wonderful things, because as politicians over here in New Zealand, we travel in taxis all the time. I was travelling to the airport, over to Wellington Airport, up to the promised land of Auckland. And as I was doing that, I had a conversation with the taxi driver, and this is what he said. He said to me, he said, how's it been going? Going well. There's some difficult issues in New Zealand that we're having to deal with. He was an Englishman, and he simply said to me this: do you guys realise you are just a pimple on the backside of the world? And I said, what? What do you mean, a pimple on the backside? How long have you been here? And I ardently advocated and spoke very strongly about how wonderful New Zealand is. After about 5 minutes, he then said, sorry, I stand corrected. You are a very nice pimple on the backside of the world. Now, it's really interesting because in one sense, even though this was a funny sort of story, there was some truth in a sense about the size and scale of who we are and to whom we belong. See, in one sense, on the bigger parts of the world, we are simply smaller than the rest of the other parts of the world. Why would anyone be interested in who we are and what we have to contribute? That's a very interesting question we need to ask. But at the same time too, they are still knocking on our doors. I want to sort of say that because I think one of the things that we have to be contending with in our discussions, in our debate, despite the size and the scale of who we are, we have to ask the question, what is our point of difference that we have to offer, both here in New Zealand and also out in the region? And when we know what our point of difference is, then that's what we take to the bargaining table of trade agreements, of economic development out there in the rest of the world. You see, the old man who, when interviewed by a reporter, was asked this: you come from the smallest nation in the world. And his reply back was this: no, sir, I come from the biggest ocean in the world. And what a confident reply. Only because of this, he knew who he was, he knew what he was contributing, he knew where he came from. Can I say to us in our Pacifica people, we have to absolutely know who we are, to whom we belong, but also what is it that we contribute to the rest of the world. We need to be confident, as the old man said, I come from the biggest ocean in the world. Why? Because there was once a history that was told about us that we were idle navigators. We were the people that somehow idled around the world, and we found these little islands. And yet in the vastness of the Pacific, what has now been proven to be wrong is that was this: we were conscious, we were confident, we were capable travelers and navigators of the whole of the Pacific. We were navigators for the rest of the world. We inhabited the very islands that people have documented about. So when the people from Europe, when the people from England and other places came, who did they find? They found Polynesian Pacifica people inhabiting those islands with the civilization, with the confidence of who they had and what they could contribute. So we need to have that confidence. So can I say to us this: we are political navigators. Our people and our community need us. They need us to be conscious of the currents of the world that are around us. They need to know what the political opinion is around. But at the same time too, they need to know the mood of their people. How well do we know our communities? How well do we connect with our people? You see, it's very easy for us in a position of power and of influence to sometimes be in a place of an ivory tower. In other words, we can become disconnected. We can become disconnected. So these are the things that are absolutely important to who we are as leaders, as political navigators. That's the task that you have. That's the task that I have. And you and I are similar in a number of senses. I'm a new MP. I'm the first Cook Islander, Kiwi of Cook Island descent, to be here in this New Zealand Parliament. And I'm only here today because of this. I had my grandmother, I had my family and the people around me who supported me to be here. But because of that, I have a sense of accountability and responsibility back to them. Today, I don't want to talk to rhetoric about the amount of contribution that we have, because others will talk about that. I want to make a passionate plea for this one thing. To you and I that are here today, we will debate for 3 days about the issues. For the first time, we're doing this. We're stopping and we're saying, this is our space. You see, sometimes we need the palangis and the papas to be outside the room. Now, they won't be, because they'll actually be inside here with us. But sometimes we need to have the outsiders out of the room. And here's the reasons why. Because we need to discuss our issues. What we also need to say is this: what are we going to take responsibility for? Yes, we've had aid for many years. Yes, we've had people who are supporting our development. But when are we going to take responsibility? When are we going to find our own sustainability? There comes a time where we need to say, both domestically here in New Zealand, to our own Pacifica communities, I am outraged when people use our communities to stroke a charitable ego, and when they call the poverty of our nations. We came here. Our people know what poverty smells like, tastes like, and they've lived it. But you guess what? We don't see it as poverty. Let's turn what other people see as a negative as a positive to who we have as a people. We have so much to contribute to this nation. We have so much to contribute in our passion. We are more than just sporting people. We are more than just performers and dancers on a stage. We have intelligence. Let us call back the intelligence that come from the navigators of the past. Let us stand confidently and contribute not only to New Zealand, but to the Pacific and to whoever else comes. Mr. Speaker, I'm proud to be in this place today to speak to the leaders that are here today, to our Pacifica community. We have a pride of place in this country, in this region, and today is our day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Sir William Seal.
Mr. Speaker, may I quickly acknowledge